Hi, I'm Ronnie Meek, and welcome to the Unbelievers Bible Study, Session 24, Wisdom. The section of the Bible known as the Books of Wisdom actually contains 5 books. It begins with Job, then goes to Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Now, we've already covered Job in one session, and we covered Psalms in another session. In this session, we're going to cover Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. They're shorter books. And it seems that these books would appeal to unbelievers because in the first 2 books, Job and Psalms, God is very prominent. But in these last 3, they tend to only make passing reference to him. And Song of Solomon doesn't actually directly mention him at all. So why are they in the Bible? Well, let's see. Proverbs is what it says it is. It's a collection of sayings, wise sayings, mostly attributed to Solomon, but there are others as well. It doesn't really have any narrative. It just has these proverbs, these wise sayings. I have a good friend whose name is Sam, and Sam's been very successful in business, even though he never went to business school. He never went to college, actually. And the area where he's had success is a highly technical area, and he's been able to thrive in it. We have a mutual friend named David whose son was looking to go into business, and he contacted Sam and said, "Sam, do you have any advice for my son as he gets ready to go into business?" And Sam said, "Yes, I do. I read the book of Proverbs every month. If you read 1 chapter a day, that basically will take you through the book of Proverbs in a month." You see, Proverbs is the kind of book that can speak new every day, and it's practical wisdom. Proverbs prizes wisdom and contrasts it with foolishness. In fact, it has a lot to say about fools. It uses the word 32 times. A fool is hot-headed. A fool spreads slander. A fool finds pleasure in wicked schemes. A fool gushes folly. A fool spurns discipline. A fool is quick to quarrel. A fool exalts himself, just to name 7 attributes that it says about a fool. And we actually live in a culture, we live in a society that finds some of these things to be admirable. Quick to quarrel? Oh, yeah. Exalting himself? Well, if you don't toot your horn, who's going to? A fool spurns discipline. Nobody can tell me what to do. But I think that the fact that our culture collides with Proverbs on this is not going to throw any shade on Proverbs. I think our culture is the one that's in the wrong. And while Proverbs does not define a fool, just merely mentions attributes, the book of Psalms does define a fool twice. Psalm 14, Psalm 53, the fool says in his heart, "There is no God." Some notable quotes from Proverbs 16:18, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." We may not believe that. We may think, this person's full of pride and I don't see any destruction. Just wait. Just give it some time. A generous person, Proverbs 11:25, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. There's a piece of wisdom for you that isn't often heard in our country. Proverbs 14:12, There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. That's pretty important. Proverbs 31, which is the last chapter of Proverbs, talks about the role of women, a virtuous woman, and her role in society. She clothes and provides for her family. So, well, yeah, that's homework, right? She is also described as an astute businesswoman, dealing with merchants, seeing that her trading is profitable. Oh, well, that sounds like it's permissible for her to work outside the home. Well, and she buys land. So I guess she's able to own land as well. She speaks with wisdom and teaches. She's someone more worth listening to. This description of a virtuous woman is over 3,000 years old, or approximately 3,000 years old. I don't know that most women in the world, certainly, but even in Western culture, there are many who doesn't enjoy this kind of status that the Bible attributed to women 3,000 years ago. I used to be a pastor, and there's a sermon there, but we're going to move on to Ecclesiastes. Of all the books in the Bible, this is the one that I look at and go, what is this thing doing here? Because it seems to say a lot of things that contradict a whole lot of what the rest of the Bible has to say. But you have to look at the context, and that's finally what sold it for me. The context is Solomon's life. Solomon was King David's son, and he had a good start. Excellent start. He was the wealthiest king of his day and known as the wisest man on earth. But he had a poor end. And this book sheds light on why he ended poorly. See, he basically abandoned following the Lord, and that left only hedonism. Hedonism, you probably know what that is, but it's basically, hey, if it feels good, do it. That's the only guiding star that I have in life. And hedonism is the only, in my mind, logical alternative without God. But it's also an empty way to live. Therefore, the book starts out with Solomon saying, meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. He even claims that wisdom is meaningless. Pleasures are meaningless. Folly is meaningless. Toil is meaningless. This is about a man who has turned from God for meaning. And you can certainly use some of these verses to declare that God doesn't matter, but I consider this a cautionary tale, because when God is the only place where meaning is found. Even in pleasure, there's meaningfulness in pleasure if God is part of your frame of reference. The most famous passage in Ecclesiastes is a profoundly beautiful poem. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. To me, the most profound verse, though, is chapter 3, verse 11. It comes shortly after this poem, and it says this: He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Truly, our hearts long for eternity, knowing deep inside that we were made for something other than this world. And then the Song of Solomon, also known as the Song of Songs, and also known as the Canticle. What about it? Well, it's basically a play. There are three voices in this play, moving from scene to scene with basically no plot. It's kind of like a theater of the abstract Greek theater experience. There's the female lover, there's the male lover, and then there are the friends who form a chorus. It is a love story. But what is it about? Well, many people consider it to be a metaphor for God and Israel, or Christ and the church, or Christ and the individual believer. There's little agreement about this poem. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want to say this. For me, there is also little doubt about its erotic nature. And therefore, I believe it's simply a love poem between a man and a woman. If you want some strong erotic metaphor, I suggest the first half of chapter 5. I'm not going to read it or tell you what it is, but maybe I've whetted your appetite. You might go open the Bible. My favorite passage is great wisdom, though, and it is at the end of the book, chapter 8, verse 7. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned. Now that's wisdom. Next, we're going to look at the nature of biblical prophecy before heading into the major and minor prophets. There are a few things that we need to establish about prophecy before we actually go there and understand. So that's where we're going next time, and I hope you'll join me.